morning, everyone. This is Julie McDonald with Microcom Technologies, and I'd like to thank all of you for attending today's webinar with Cambium Networks. Today's host is John Mead, and he is their Senior Director of Engineering and Product Development, and he will be presenting today. If anyone has any questions, please submit them in the question box, and John will answer them at the end of today's presentation. John, thank you so much for being with us this morning. We greatly appreciate it. I'm finished for now. Please go ahead and take it on over.
Great. Thank you very much, Julie. I appreciate you setting this up. Hello to everybody. Today, I'm going to talk about the Ethernet switching portfolio branded as CN Matrix from Cambium Networks. I'm going to give you an entire overview of the portfolio, talk about all of our switches, highlight some of our features, highlight some of the reasons why we feel we are differentiated from some of the other switching vendors that are out there. So let me jump right into it here. So quickly, I'm going to cover two families of switches that we have, the TX family of switches, the EX family of switches. I'm going to talk about one of our features that I'm very passionate about. I could talk all day about it, but I'll try to keep within the time restraints. Policy-based automation, and I refer to this as PBA. So I'll go through an overview of that. I will stick to just an overview. If anyone is interested in hearing more, we can set up a follow-up meeting with demos and so on. And then may sound boring, but there's some pretty cool accessories that are available, and I will just touch on those real quick, and then we can jump into Q&A. So here we go. This slide right here is probably my favorite slide, probably the most important slide. And what I want to point out is that, I'm here today to talk to you about the Ethernet switches from Cambium Networks, but it's really not just about the switches. So it's about the overall comprehensive solution that we offer to the customer. So yes, we have our switches that provide the wired connectivity. We have our Wi-Fi and our fixed wireless radios that provide the wireless connectivity. And then the third component that kind of ties it all together is our management platform with CN Maestro and XMS Cloud. And these three components play really, really nicely together. It is a very comprehensive solution for the customer. Specifically to the switches, some of the things that we offer is zero touch simplicity with our PBA feature that I will talk about. A lot of work on security. We like to say we have automated security with auto segmentation, automatic device profiling, and also automatic policy enforcement. And all the features and capabilities I'm going to talk to you about today, the warranty that comes with it, it all adds up to be a very competing, very low total cost of ownership. So not just about the switches, it's about the solution that we offer. And about the switches. So I have two families of switches that I'm showing here. I'm showing just a few of the SKUs. On the left side, you see our EX family of switches. These are our enterprise access switches, designed for the access layer of your network or the edge of the network. On the right, you see our WISP or tower switches, and these are designed for tower type of deployments. So about the enterprise switches, we have all the different port counts and speeds and feeds that you would normally expect. We have two series of enterprise switches. We have the EX2K and the EX1K. I'll touch on that in a little bit, but we have 12 models. 8-port models, 24-port models, 48-port models. We have PoE versions and non-PoE versions as well. We also have a switch that is multi-gig. It's an interesting configuration. It's a hybrid configuration. Not every port, not every device on your network needs 2.5 gig. So this hybrid solution gives you enough 2.5 gig ports for, let's say, your high-end Wi-Fi access points. And then it gives you also 1 gig ports for your typical connections to the printer and things like that. Now these 2.5 gig ports on this one switch, I'm kind of highlighting this switch right now. These 2.5 gig ports also support 60 watts of PoE. Typically 99% of all the switches out there today have support up to 30 watts of PoE power. That's 802.3 AF-AT gives you up to 30 watts. So we do support BT on these ports, which gives you up to 60 watts. 60 watts is needed on some of the really high-end cameras, cameras that might have some mechanical movement, or some of the high-end access points as well. Our switches, the majority of our switches support 10 gig fiber uplinks. Our 8-port switches have 1 gig fiber uplinks. Okay, quick overview on the enterprise switches. Now let's move over to our tower switches. Again, we have 2 series of tower switches. We have the TX2K and the TX1K. We have an 8-port, 16-port, 24-port. I'm going to go through the details of this in a follow-up slide. So anyway, here's our 2 families of switches. Now, what about the software that runs on these switches? We use one code base for both families of switches. It's a big win for us. It helps us very effectively and efficiently develop new features. It helps us test the new features quite a bit. So one software code base and one software image. The software will dynamically detect if it's running on an enterprise switch or a tower switch, and it will turn on the appropriate features for that. Now, I joined Cambium about 5 years ago to kick off this Ethernet portfolio, and we sat down. We spent a good year just making some key decisions, and number one, maybe not exciting for the customer. It's not really about a specific feature, but number one, we wanted to design in high quality and robustness. So, and this is from a hardware point of view as well as from a software point of view. So that's point number one. Number two, these switches, these are enterprise grade, layer 2, layer 3 switches, non-blocking, full line rate, fully managed, and I'll touch on all of this as we go through. Operational efficiency or ease of use, this is a big one for us. We wanted to make it easy for you to deploy these switches, to manage these switches, to configure these switches, to maintain these switches, and if necessary, to troubleshoot. And it's not just about troubleshooting the switches, it's about troubleshooting your network. Sometimes the problem is on the switch, sometimes the problem is on one of your devices, or maybe on an upstream switch, but ease of use from a troubleshooting point of view as well. Now, this operational efficiency that I'm talking about, this is not a feature that we finished. This will never be finished. Every software release we have, we add in new bells and whistles to make it easier to use these switches. This is the key for our CN Matrix platform. So highly secure, people are talking about security all the time. We have a long list of security features. We also have our PBA feature that helps quite a bit, and I will touch on that. Cloud on-premise network management. So our cloud-based CN Maestro network management system can manage all of your switches, all of your Wi-Fi access points, anything that Cambium develops, you can manage with this management platform. It's really, really nice. Best in class total cost of ownership. I touched on this earlier. Every feature that I'm talking about today comes with the base price of the switch. We do have 2 versions of our cloud management. We have our CN Maestro Essentials, which is free with the purchase of the switch. You can do all the things I'm talking about today. There's also CN Maestro X that gives you some more advanced features as well, and there is a subscription for that, and that's pretty nice too. Let me give you an example. You can get statistics on the switch on your devices for up to 7 days, I believe, with Essentials. So you get a historical stats. With CN Maestro X, it's not 7 days, I believe it's much longer, 30 days. So that's just an example of what you get with CN Maestro X. Okay, a little overview on our WISP tower switches, so I'll dig in a little bit deeper on these. So real quick, these switches are purpose-built for these WISP or tower deployments. So the types of things that you need in these towers, we have built into these switches. So first of all, this WISP or tower switch, it is an enterprise-grade, non-blocking, fully managed L2, L3 switch. It supports our CN Maestro Cloud Management that I talked about. It has zero-touch simplicity with automated configuration, which I will explain more with PBA. With PBA, you also get automated security with the automatic device profiling and automatic policy enforcement. These switches, these WISP switches, also come with very intelligent and flexible PoE. So in the enterprise space, PoE obviously is very, very common, very popular, but it's all standards based. 802.3, AF, AT, BT, it's all standards based. In the WISP deployments, there's a lot of devices out there that don't use standard PoE, that uses non-standard or passive PoE, either 24 volt or 54 volt. And these switches inherently support those modes as well. So you don't need special power injectors and so on. Cambium sync. Now on the TX2K, we do support Cambium sync, which is something that is needed by some of the Cambium radios. On the TX2K, we do support dual redundant GPS synchronization sources, so you get a little bit of redundancy built in. Also on the TX2K, we use removable power supplies. On the TX2020, we have 2 removable power supplies, so you get redundancy from a power supply as well. You don't need both power supplies. The system is 100% functional with only 1 power supply. All these switches, the TX1K and the TX2K, are hardened from an extended temperature range point of view, and they have some extra surge suppression built in as well. So quick overview on the TX switches. Another quick view here. Here's the TX2K family. Ideal for, I'll give you some examples of Cambium radios, but the 450M, right? So the 450M needs up to 90 watts of power. Well, the TX2K family can support up to 4 radios, 4 of these 450Ms on the TX2012, or up to 8 simultaneously. 8 of these radios all pulling 90 watts at the same time can be supported on these TX2K families. Also the 450i, a very popular radio that matches well with the TX2K as well. On the TX1K, perfect fit for the EPMP portfolio from Cambium. So a nice fit there as well. Quick overview of the 2 SKUs. So the TX2K and the TX1K, they're both enterprise grade, non-blocking L2, L3 switches. They both support our Cambium's cloud managed Scene Maestro. They both have 10 gig. They both have 4 10 gig fiber uplinks. The number of access ports, of course, varies. We have 8-port versions, 16-port versions, and 24-port versions. The TX1K comes in an 8-port version only. Want to point that out. And what's unique on the TX2028, it's kind of a cool configuration, but we have the 4 10 gig fiber uplinks, check. But we also have 8 1 gig fiber uplinks on that switch as well. Removable power supplies. So the TX2K has removable power supplies. The power supply that you choose, we have AC, we have DC, we have different sizes depending on what type of devices you're going to be using. The TX1K does not have removable power supplies. It comes with a fixed internal supply. Another difference on the TX1K is it does not support Cambium sync. Okay, other differences, the 2 main differences are just kind of speeds and feeds. On the TX2K, we support either 4 or 8 ports that can give you up to 90 watts. On the TX1K, we can it supports up to 2 ports of 90 watts of power. And on the passive PoE, again, on the TX1K, we support 4 ports. On the TX2K, we support up to 8 ports, depending on which model you buy. And maybe the biggest difference is this final row. On the TX2K, we do support the removable power supplies that I mentioned. On the TX1K, they're fixed internal. So on these fixed internal power supplies, on the AC model, we support up to 200 watts of PoE power budget. On the DC model, we support up to 170 watts of PoE power budget. Okay, let's spend a little bit of time on the enterprise switches. Okay, the enterprise switches. So this is your typical enterprise campus deployment. this is a 3-tier architecture. Um, 2-tier is also very, very popular, maybe more popular than 3-tier. But what I want to show here applies to both. So the layer in your network that I'm showing right now, this is the edge of your network, or referred to as the access layer of your network. And that access layer is where all your devices connect in. So your devices can connect directly into the switches if they're wired devices, or if your devices are wireless, they can connect into the access points that then connect into the switches. So this access layer, 100% covered by Cambium. You know, we got the switches that I'm talking about today. We also have the Wi-Fi access points. What's the next layer? So the next layer, I call it the distribution layer or the aggregation layer, and that's where these edge switches will tie into. So here's your next layer, and it's just a consolidation of these edge switches. These aggregation switches, they're usually all fiber. You have fiber runs going from your access switches up to your distribution switches. And then the third layer is your core. Now, in some deployments, the core layer and the distribution layer are integrated together. But in the core layer, that's where you have your access to the internet, and that's your cnMaestro management. If you have it on-premise, right? We do support on-premise. You can have it on-premise on-site, or your cnMaestro can be located off in the internet. So this picture shows you what Cambium is going to provide. So the access layer, we're shipping it today with the Wi-Fi access points and the switches. The distribution layer, these aggregation switches, kind of a sneak peek. We're not shipping them yet, but next year we will be shipping aggregation switches. So from Cambium, you can get your access layer, your distribution layer, and then of course your management infrastructure with cnMaestro and XMS. This slide is probably one of my favorite slides. So we're talking about the access layer, and all the switches that I've been talking to you about so far are for this access layer, or the edge of your network. Now, this market is a huge market out there. This enterprise edge market is a $9.6 billion market. Now, that's including only edge switches. I am not including the core switches, the aggregation switches. I am not including the data center switches. So just the edge switches is 9.6 billion. So what do you do as a switching vendor like Cambium? Do we build one switch and say, here you go, use this at your edge? No, we don't do that, and other vendors don't either. So we have many families of switches that you can buy for this enterprise edge space. So if you look at this picture, this graph down here, we have the 1K, the EX 1K series at the bottom left, and that's available shipping today. I talked about it. We have the EX 2K series of switches, and that's available today. And we also have a future program, kind of another sneak peek here. We have some EX3K, a line of EX3K switches coming out next year. The first ones are coming out in Q1 actually. So depending on what the customer needs, we have these three series of enterprise switches to choose from. So what are the differences between them? Well, they're more expensive, and with some are more expensive than others, and with that extra money you get extra features. This is overly simplified way of saying it, but real quick, the EX1K are for customers that are price driven. You know, we can talk to them about the cool features we have, but they say we don't care, we just want a basic switch and we want the lowest price possible. The EX1K fits that type of customer very well. The EX2K, in the middle of my graph there, the EX2K is the sweet spot for the enterprise access layer. We have a comprehensive set of features, and we offer this at very competitive pricing. Now, what about the EX3K, right? Why would I want to pay any more? What kind of features do I get? Well, you're going to get features like dual removable power supplies. There are some customers out there that want that redundancy in their switches. And it's not just about having two power supplies in case one fails. The two power supplies allow you to connect into two circuits in your building. So if one circuit blows for whatever reason, you still have the other circuit. So anyway, dual removable power supplies, higher density of 802.3 BT ports, or ports that can supply up to 60 watts. Devices that need more than 30 are becoming more and more popular. The third item on this EX3K is higher density of multi-gig ports. I told you about the switch that we have, a hybrid version. We're going to be coming out with some switches that have a much higher density of 2.5 gig ports. And finally, with this 3K, we're going to have more advanced architecture, more advanced silicon. We will be supporting larger table sizes and more advanced features as well. So anyway, so this is kind of the strategy that we have for this enterprise edge market, which is huge, 9.6 billion. Okay, a little bit about the software capabilities that we do support. A lot of these software features you may not need, but think of it as a way to future-proof your network. 2 years from now, you need new features. You don't want to have to do a forklift upgrade of your switching infrastructure. These switches that we're designing, these switches that we're selling you today, they are designed to last you 5 years or 10 years. No problem at all. So real quick, fully featured switches, enterprise grade, I can't say that enough. We support layer 2 switching and layer 3 switching. And layer 3 switching, we support not just static routes, but we support dynamic routing as well. We have extensive ACLs, filters, and QoS support, and a long list of security features. So fully featured switches, if you need it, 99% chance we have it for you. Again, when you say enterprise grade, a lot of that has to do with management as well. So these are fully managed switches. We have a very detailed COI. You can touch any feature, any sub-feature that you want with our COI. It's a Cisco-like syntax. So if you're familiar with configuring a switch with Cisco COI, you'll be able to configure ours. Excuse me. We also have a very user-friendly web GUI. And then we also have every one of our features is instrumented with an SNMP MIB. So if you have your favorite SNMP app, you can of course use it with our switches as well. And then finally, which I've mentioned several times already, and it's worth mentioning again, is the network management solution that we have for not managing just one device, but for all the devices in your network. And that's CN Maestro, which is available to you in the cloud or on premise, either way. Now, from a management point of view, we also support virtual stacking. So you can manage multiple switches, no limit on the number of switches, no limit on the physical location of the switches, but you can manage this group of switches as if it was one, right? You create a VLAN, it gets created on all your switches. Okay, uplinks. So why do I make a big deal about this? Because it's important. You look at a lot of switches out there. You'll see switches with 1 gig fiber uplinks, right? So you have 24 ports of 1 gig, and they're all feeding into a 1 or 2 fiber 1 gig ports. It doesn't work. So on our switches, our 24 port switches, our 48 port switches, all of our TX switches, we have 4 10 gig fiber uplink ports. PoE. I mentioned this before, but we do put a lot of energy into our PoE. You have complete control on a port by port basis. You can enable, you can disable, you can monitor, you can prioritize the power, and you can automate it. You can do a toggle. You can turn off the power and then turn it back on with just a single button. That toggle capability is a great way to wake up a device that's not behaving as expected. Some advanced features, I've kind of teased out this feature, policy-based automation. I'll talk more about it in a bit. It's also worth mentioning again that we do support layer 3, not just static routes, but dynamic routing. We support RIP and we support OSPF as well. A true zero-touch experience. So this goes back to my comment about ease of use. We really do want to make it easy to use these switches, easy for initial deployment, as well as easy for ongoing maintenance and configuration and management. So ease of use, so a true zero-touch experience, we can deliver that to you with our PBA feature. And I'm going to talk about that in more detail. Again, everything that I've talked about today comes all at one low all-inclusive price. You get this cloud-based management for free. That's awesome. You get on the EX switches, you get a 5-year warranty. A lot of vendors out there offer 1-year warranty. You do get Cambium support comes with that as well. Cambium support is very good. I'm impressed. You place a phone call, someone will actually answer that call. So it's great. So best in class TCO. This slide is an eye chart. I'm not going to go through this slide with you, but this is our portfolio of products. It's a nice comparison of the port configuration and what type of, what's the PoE power budget on each of our switches and so on. Okay, PBA. So why am I making such a big deal out of PBA? So Ethernet switching today is not a new technology. It is a very mature technology. You can buy a good Ethernet switch from many different vendors. When you compare Ethernet switching from one vendor to another, it's hard to find differences, right? If you look at all the L2 related features and capabilities, you're going to see the same list from HP, from Cisco, from Cambium. If you look at some of the L3 features for edge switches, some switches won't support L3, some do, but RIP, OSPF, everyone kind of has it. So how do you differentiate yourself? Well, we do have a great comprehensive solution. I talked about that. Our CN Maestro management solution is awesome. But we also have something else that differentiates us, which is PBA. So policy-based automation really does give you some advantages. Customers that have tried it love it. The customers that have tried it, they keep using it and they buy more switches. So we're just trying to communicate and get the word out. Here is a little bit of information. It's kind of a teaser. I can get you more information later if you need it. First, let's talk about the term zero touch. So zero touch means 10 different things to 10 different people. Let me give you my definition of zero touch. So an overall high-level summary, zero touch equates to automating the configuration that is otherwise necessary. So let's take an example. So if you're deploying your switches for a first time, there is some initial configuration that you want to put on these switches, some initial staging. Some examples of that are static VLANs, uplink ports, link aggregation, your IP address, is it DHCP or is it static, things like that. So this pre-staging that you want to do of a switch, we do not require you to do that. You don't have to do that manually. You can automate that process. And the way we do that is with our management platform, CN Maestro. So when you take your switch out of the cardboard box and you plug it in and you connect it to the network, it will automatically find CN Maestro. Whether it's on-premise or in the cloud, it will automatically find it. And once it finds it, it goes through the onboarding and registration process. During that process, an initial config file that you've created is downloaded, which takes care of all this initial configuration. So zero touch for initial deployment of your switches. And that's what zero touch means to a lot of people. For me, that's only the first half, and it's the less exciting half. The second half of zero touch for me is what about the day-to-day ongoing operations, the day-to-day configuration that is required. So as you connect devices, as you remove devices, right? So you connect access points, you connect cameras, you connect printers, or if you start talking about IoT, then there's thousands of examples. But for each one of these devices that you connect to your switch, there is some configuration required on your switch. At a minimum, you want to say what VLAN that device should be on. So that the VLAN for that switch needs to be created, and then that specific port needs to be made a member of that VLAN. Oh, and by the way, the uplink port also has to be a member of that VLAN. So that's the VLAN configuration, but there's other configuration you might want to do, security-related configuration, QoS-related configuration, simple things like labeling a port or prioritizing PoE. So these types of things you need to configure on the switch. So the question for zero touch is, can I do this with zero touch? Can I automate this somehow? Well, the way we automate it is with policy-based automation, and I'll tell you how. Now, I talked to you about how to automate the configuration, but what happens when you remove a device? It's equally important, or maybe more important, to clean up that configuration. And with PBA, we do that cleanup for you automatically. So you don't leave sensitive VLANs open on an exposed port for another malicious device to be plugged into. So anyway, proper cleanup when you remove devices as well. So real quick summary here. What does PBA do for you? It automates the adds, moves, and changes of networking devices. It eliminates error-prone and time-consuming manual configuration. Every port is treated equally, right? With PBA, we are constantly looking at each device that is plugged into each port, automatically getting the device profile, automatically checking to see if it matches one of the policies. So you can plug this device into any port you want. It enhances security by automatically detecting the port and automatically segmenting it based on the policy. So this is a big win and can stop some security concerns. Overall, it really does reduce the expenses, the operational expenses required to deploy and manage your switch. Let me tell you a little bit about how it works. So first you have to create this policy. Well, how do you create it? You can create it at any one of the management interfaces that I talked about, SNMP, WebGUI, COI, but we really recommend that you use CN Maestro or XMS Cloud to configure this policy. When you configure this policy once on CN Maestro, it gets pushed down to all your switches. So let's say you have 1 or 2 switches, great. But let's say you have 100 or 200 switches. This policy will get pushed down to all of those switches. There's 2 main components within a policy. The first component tells you how to match this device. I mean, if you're looking for a video surveillance camera of a certain type, how do you match that? So we can set up this rule based on 2 mechanisms. One is using MAC addresses. We can use MAC address ranges. We can use specific MAC addresses. We can use an OUI. And then we have a new feature coming out in just a couple months, which uses MAC lists. So you can create a list of MAC addresses, and if your device matches that list, then it's a policy match. So in addition to MAC addresses, we also use link layer discovery protocol, which is a protocol it's a point-to-point protocol between the switch and the device, and the device will send the switch information. And there's all kinds of little data snippets inside of that LLDP packet. We can use any of those data snippets to learn about the device and to even match that device. So two mechanisms for matching a device, MAC-based and LLDP-based. Now the actions, once you match a device, what actions do you want performed? Well, we can do any of these actions within the policy, so automatically. So VLANs, QoS support, security items, user priority, the PUE priority, port labeling, any of these things we can support as one of the actions for your PBA policy. And again, what I said earlier, the configuration that happens as a result of one of these policies is dynamic. So when you remove that device from the port, this configuration is automatically cleaned up. Okay, let me give you a quick example. If I was going to do a demo today, I would have 1 or 2 access points, and I would show you, the creation of a policy. Then I would show you, what happens when I plugged in these 1 or 2 devices. And it's kind of a cool demo to give. You'll see the switch has an empty configuration, and then once we plug in a device, you'll see, wow, all this configuration automatically appeared. And then when I remove the device, you would see that all this configuration is all of a sudden cleaned up, no longer exists. So it's a nice demo to give. But that's just 1 or 2 devices. In the real world, I have an example here for an education or campus or MDU deployment. Let's say you're deploying a network with 20 switches, and you don't have 1 or 2 cameras, you have 200 video surveillance cameras and 100 access points. So how would you do this with PBA? Well, with PBA, you would need to create two policies, one for the video surveillance cameras and one for the access points. Once you create those two policies, you're done. And if I had more time today, I could give you a demo. You know, it takes 1 or 2 minutes or even less to create a policy. So within 5 minutes, you could create these two policies, no problem. And then you're ready. So now you can start plugging in these 200 cameras. You can start plugging in these 100 access points, and you just physically plug it in and walk away. You don't need to manually log into the switch. You don't need to manually configure anything. You physically plug these devices in. The PBA feature will automatically detect the device and automatically enforce the policy if there's a match. So the correct VLANs will be created. Any QoS or security settings that you have will automatically be configured. So truly 100% zero touch. Okay, on to the exciting part, RC and matrix accessories. So I just wanted to point out real quick, on our TX2K switches, it uses these removable power supplies. These are CRPS units. Now these do not ship with the switch, okay? There's too many different combinations. So we offer 6 different types: AC power supplies, DC power supplies, with different amounts of PUE power budget. So we have 600, 930, and 1200 watt supplies that you can choose from. So you buy the switch and then you buy one of these power supplies separately. So just really want to make sure it's clear, the power supply does not come with a switch. You need to order it as an accessory. Now, we have the 6 different types that I mentioned. For the AC versions, they don't ship with power cords. Again, depending on what region in the world you live in, you might need a different type of power cord. So we leave it up to the customer to get their own power cords. And that's, I haven't had any pushback on that. So these are the CRPS units as an accessory. Also, what people don't know is that Cambium also has our own transceivers. We have our own SFP or 1 gig transceivers, as well as our SFP plus or 10 gig transceivers. And we have all the main types that you might need: long reach, short reach, 1 gig, 10 gig, and we offer copper SFPs or SFP pluses as well. Okay, rack mount ears. This seems silly to talk about, but I get this question asked all the time. We ship rack mount ears with any switch that is a full rack width. If the switch is partial rack width, like our 8-port switches are partial rack width, you need to buy, a lot of customers don't mount them in racks, so we do not ship them with rack mount ears. If you do want to mount it in a rack, you can, no problem. You just need to buy the accessory, the rack mount kit accessory. So 8-port switches, you need to buy the accessory. All the full width switches, it comes with rack mount ears. You can buy more rack mount ears as spares if you want, but it comes with them. Now, one thing to point out on the very bottom of this table, the TX1K switch, you can wall mount it, you can rack mount it, you can also DIN rail mount it as well. You just need to buy the right kit, and I have that in this table. Okay, let's see. I think that might be it. That is it. So, Julie, I'll pass it back to you for Q&A.
Thank you so much, John, for that wonderful presentation. Greatly appreciated. And it looks like we do have some questions for you. Let's get started with the first one.
Okay.
Okay. I think you did mention warranties, but it says here regarding CN matrix switches, what are the warranties on those devices?
Yeah, good question. And so our TX switches, these are hardened from a temperature point of view. You can put them outdoors, but they have to go inside of a NEMA enclosure. So they're not IP67. You can't put them in the rain, but they are hardened from a temperature point of view. But anyway, these switches, these TX switches, have a 3-year warranty. The EX switches come with a 5-year warranty. And then we also have additional extended warranties that you can purchase. But what comes with the purchase of the switch is either 5 years for the EX or 3 years for the TX.
Excellent. Thank you so much, John. Next question, and I know you talked about rack mounts, but it says here, will all CN matrix switches come with the rack mounts, or do we have to buy them separately?
Yeah, no, so thanks for asking that question. That question gets asked a lot, and that's why I covered it. It was on my last slide there, so you probably sent in the question before I talked about it.
That's
yeah,
correct.
I'll say it again. If the switch is a normal rack width, then it comes with rack mount ears. It comes in the switch, no problem. If the switch is partial, like our, as an example, our EX 2010 or our TX 2012, those are 8-port switches. They are only roughly half of a rack width. For those, we do have a rack mount kit, and it's one short rack ear and one long rack ear. So the switch will be all the way up against the left side of the rack or all the way up against the right side of the rack. But anyway, that rack mount kit does not come with the switch. You need to order that as an accessory.
Thank you so much for that, John. Next question here for you. Will the CN matrix switch work with other brands without any problems?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do get that question as well. But, you know, the Ethernet switching market is very, very mature. So an Ethernet port, as long as you've designed it correctly, it's very standard. You can plug an Ethernet port from one vendor into an Ethernet port of another vendor, no problem. I can't even give you an example of a vendor that has problems. But the Cambium switches, for sure, we do a lot of this interoperability testing. And yeah, it absolutely follows the standard, and it works with any other vendor.
Great, John. Thank you for that. Next question here. Regarding policy-based automation, is this going to be implemented as well on the non-CN matrix switches?
So at Cambium, all of our switches are branded as CN matrix, and all of the switches that we make at Cambium support policy-based automation. Policy-based automation, though, is a proprietary feature. It only exists at Cambium. In fact, the feature is very, very cool. I don't know of any other vendor that can do anything quite like this. Some vendors have something similar, but not focused on the edge like we do. We've been working on this feature for a very, very long time, and it's proprietary to the Cambium CN matrix switches.
Thank you very much, John. Next question here for you. On the PoE switches, are all ports PoE or split?
Good question. The answer is all the ports are PoE, for sure. And the reason why I'm kind of laughing is, so I've been building switches for, 25 years now. When I first built, I was at a different company. The first PoE switch I ever built, we said, oh, you don't need PoE on all the ports. So half were PoE and half were non-PoE. And we actually got a lot of pushback from the customers. They did not like that at all, because they had to, be very conscious about which port they plugged in the device. So customers, for the most part, did not like that. So I'm sorry, that's in the past, that's history. At Cambium, if it's a PoE switch, every port supports PoE. And I'm talking about the RJ45 ports, all the copper ports. Fiber ports, of course, do not support PoE.
Thank you, John. Next question here for you. Are the ports for the WISP switches, are those all PoE?
Okay, now this is a really good question. I have a great slide that can show this, but the presentation would have been longer. So the PoE capabilities on our TX switches, we support a lot of different types of PoE. We support standards-based PoE on every port of the TX switches, no problem. Standards-based PUE is what we promote. It's what we believe in. It's safer. It has a detection mechanism built into the standard. It has a negotiation mechanism built into the standard. So that's standards-based PUE. Every port on our TX switches supports the standards-based PUE. Now, when it comes to the non-standard PUE modes, we do support, for example, 24-volt passive PUE. We also support 54-volt passive PUE. For those modes, we don't support those modes on every port. So if you really want to use like 24-volt passive PUE, half of the ports support that, and the other half just support standards-based PUE. The same thing for our high-powered 4-pair 54-volt passive PUE. Like for example, we support up to 90 watts. We support that high power passive PUE on half of the ports. Now with our standards-based PUE, I just want to reiterate, we support standards-based PUE on every port. And in fact, 802.3 BT, which supports up to 90 watts, we support that as well. But again, that high power PUE, that requires 4-pair PUE versus 2-pair PUE. And the 4-pair PUE is implemented on half the ports. It's kind of a confusing answer. It's easier to show it on my slide. So if anyone has further questions afterwards, we can follow up after the fact.
Of course we can. Thank you so much, John. Next question here for you, couple more after that. Can I manage WISP tower installs and enterprise installs from a single management platform?
Yeah, I love this question. Absolutely. You can, with CN Maestro, you could manage you can manage your Cambium radios, you can manage your Cambium switches, your Wi-Fi, your TX switches and your enterprise switches, which is what the question was. You can also manage your Wi-Fi access points, all with a single instance of CN Maestro. So CN Maestro is quite nice. I can't say enough about it. A lot of companies have taken their old style management platform and kind of, made a cloud-based management system out of it, and it doesn't work, right? It's like putting a square peg through a round hole. At Cambium, what we did is we started from the ground up and designed a cloud-based management infrastructure from the ground up, and it is quite nice. And anyway, this CN Maestro cloud-based management system does support every product that we make at Cambium.
Thank you, John. Next question. Do customers have an option to purchase their choice of power cord from Cambium as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. I should have mentioned that. So, I mentioned we do not, the very first 4 switches we made, we had 9 versions of each because we had 9 different power cords. We stopped doing that. In all of our switches after that, we do not ship with the power cord because of all the different combinations. But you need to buy the power cord on your own. And we do sell them at Cambium. So you can buy them from Cambium, or you can get them on your own. Some people already have plenty laying around in their lab. So anyway, so you can get them anywhere you want, but which also includes Cambium. We do have the individual power cords.
Thank you, John. Last question here for you. Can anyone, of course, go to your website and find, in-person technical support, customer service, and anything to do with product management, so to speak? Can you go over that with us?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the answer is yes. So everything you just listed in that question is available on Cambium's network, Cambium's site. So we have a Cambium support site for getting documentation, for getting the latest, greatest software release. We also have all the product information as well. Like, let's say you want to look through all of our switches, and let's say there's one switch that interests you, you can download a data sheet right there on the spot. Some of the cool tables or other documents on specific features are also available at those sites as well.
Thank you, John, very much for answering all of those questions for us today. And also thank you to everyone for attending today. If you have any further questions, feel free to please contact your sales rep or email us at sales@microcomtech.com. If you wish to view any of these products mentioned or shown today, please visit us at www.microcom.us. And please remember, this webinar presentation has been recorded and will be uploaded to our Microcom YouTube channel so you could view it again. John, thank you so much for your time and all of your valuable information today. We greatly appreciate it. And until next time, we look forward to the next webinar with you for the next level of information and products that you could share with us. Thanks, everybody. Yes, thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.